The Winter War by Priscilla Shirer with Gina Detweiler. Chapter 10 and 11. Chapter 10 is The Big Stick. Xavier stared at the stick. It was leaning up against his dresser in the corner, where it had been since he had gotten back from a horse toss. He'd been staring at it for 3 days now, as snow continued to pile up outside. School would probably be canceled for a week. He didn't know how much longer he could stand it, sitting in his room, doing nothing but trying to figure out what he was supposed to do with his gift, the gift Ruach had given him. He wondered if this was his punishment for messing things up in the battle, like he should be using the stick to beat himself up. But that didn't make a whole lot of sense. For one thing, he couldn't easily hit himself with a stick this long, and he doubted that Ruach would want him to. So what do you do with a big stick? He remembered a quote from Teddy Roosevelt he'd learned in history class. "Speak softly and carry a big stick." Roosevelt meant that the big stick was used to threaten people. You didn't have to yell when you had a big stick in your hand. But that didn't seem right either. Ruach never taught the Prince Warriors to threaten others, yet it could be some kind of weapon. He'd seen martial arts experts who fought with sticks, and that had seemed pretty cool. But the Christen had completed their armor. They didn't need any more weapons. He wished Rook were here to talk to. Rook had always had a word of wisdom or encouragement to offer, even if he didn't have all the answers. Rook had saved Xavier's life and given his own in the process. Xavier still felt a pain of regret when he thought of that. If only he had been paying attention when that dragon was coming for him, then Rook might still be alive. And then, this last battle. If Rook had been with him, he would have told Xavier to stay where he was, to not try to advance over the bridge, and Xavier would have listened. Or if Mr. J.R. had been there, but neither of them were. Rook was gone, and Mr. J.R. Where was Mr. J.R. anyway? Xavier hadn't seen him in quite a while. He reached into his pocket for his phone, but realized he didn't have it. He must have left it on the kitchen table. He got up and opened his door, hoping Evan wasn't there to ambush him. Evan had wanted to go outside and build a snow castle or have a snowball war, and Xavier was trying to avoid him. Evan wasn't there. He wasn't in his room either. Xavier relaxed, thinking maybe his little brother had gone to hang out at Manuel's house. He went downstairs. His dad was sitting at the kitchen table reading the newspaper, a cup of coffee in front of him. The phone was still there too. Xavier went over to pick it up. He was going to leave when his dad spoke. "Don't even want to say hello?" Xavier turned back. "Sorry, just needed my phone." "Sit down, Xavier." Mr. Blake folded up his newspaper. Xavier groaned inwardly. He knew he was in for some sort of a talk. He sat down opposite his father, fingering the phone, trying not to look at it. "Tough day?" said his dad. "Nah, just bored." "That's not like you." "Sure you're all right?" "Sure." Xavier tried to smile. "Everything's cool." Mr. Blake peered at him a moment longer. "Okay then. But if you ever need to talk, you know I'm here." "Sure. Thanks, Dad." Xavier got up to leave and then turned back. "Hey, Dad?" "Yes?" "What do you do when you make a big mistake and you don't know how to fix it?" That's a tough question. Mr. Blake sat back in his chair thinking. You have two choices. You can learn from it, move forward, and make sure you don't do it again, or you can let it eat at you until you're unable to move forward at all. Which one are you doing? The second one, I think. Mr. Blake nodded slightly. I've been there. My dad used to tell me, don't look back unless you plan on going there. Right, said Xavier, but it's hard. Yes, it is. But you can do it, Xavier. I'm sure of that. Xavier thanked his dad and went back to his room. He put the stick in the closet and shut the door so he wouldn't have to look at it again. Then he lay down on the bed and turned on his phone. There was a message from Brianna. Mr. J.R. is in the hospital. Xavier felt his heart sink farther into his chest, so he could barely breathe. Next to his dad, Mr. J.R. was his most important role model. He hoped it wasn't anything serious. There was a knock on the door. Evan's voice. "Can I come in?" For once, Xavier welcomed the idea of talking to his little brother. He needed some distraction. "Yeah," he said. Evan opened the door slowly, looking around as if he expected to be hit by a pillow or have a pile of dirty laundry fall on his head. "What's up?" asked Xavier, trying to sound annoyed. "Nothing." Evan came into the room and shut the door. He sniffed the air. "What is that smell?" "What smell?" "It smells like Dad's aftershave. Are you using aftershave?" Xavier sighed and rolled over on the bed. "What do you want, Evan?" "I was in a horror toss." Xavier rolled back and sat up. "You were?" He wondered why Evan had been called and he hadn't. Was he no longer welcome? After what he had done, maybe he deserved that. "Yeah, and I got this." Evan showed him the rock. "This was my gift. Ruach said it was like your stick." He handed the rock to Xavier, who examined it carefully. "It's a rock," said Xavier. "I know that, duh." "Does it do anything?" "Not that I can see." "So it is just like my stick." Xavier gave him back the rock. Useless gifts for useless Prince warriors. "You think we're really useless?" "I don't know anymore." Xavier paused. "Brianna texted and said Mr. J.R. is in the hospital." "I know. He might be really sick too. I wonder why Levi didn't tell us." "I don't know. Maybe he doesn't want it to be true. Sometimes when you say something out loud, it becomes more real and you have to face it." "I don't want it to be true either," said Evan. Then he told Xavier about his trip through the scary woods and the rotting smell. The thing he called the giant empty. Something bad is going on. It's like the empty is taking over, eating up a Hortus. "Yeah." Xavier let out a deep sigh. He had thought a lot about that strange feeling in the garden. The empty. It was more than a feeling. It was like an entity, a being or a thing that had definite presence. He didn't want to tell Evan, but he had an idea of what it might be. Chapter 11, Ginger Girl, Day 8. Ivy slumped in the plastic chair outside the principal's office. Her arms folded over her chest, her knees pressed tightly together. She could hear Mrs. Loomis, the principal, talking in a loud, stern voice through the closed door. The shadowy outline of the principal loomed over the smaller one of her mother through the frosted glass of the door, making it look as though Mrs. Loomis were about to devour her. In the middle of the glass was an engraved sign, Sybil Loomis, Principal. Though her mother's replies were too soft to understand, Ivy knew what she was probably saying all the same. "Don't worry, Mrs. Loomis. I'll talk to her. It won't happen again." Finally, the door opened and her mom came out, followed by the principal, who was possibly, at least according to the majority of the kids at the Cedar Creek Middle School, the meanest woman on the planet. She might also be the tallest. Her hair was whipped into a perfect French twist and piled high on her head, with not one strand out of place. She wore a tailored green suit with snakeskin belt. She gazed down at Ivy, her lips pursed into disapproving line. Her black horn-rimmed glasses reflected the light, so Ivy couldn't see her eyes at all, only wide blank discs that silently pronounced judgment. She did not speak. She didn't have to. Next to her, Ivy's mom looked small and sad and beaten. "Come on, Ivy," said her mom in a tired voice. "Let's go home." Ivy followed her mom out of the office without looking back at Mrs. Loomis, but she could feel the principal's gaze boring a hole in the back of her head. They got into the car, and Ivy's mom started driving home. first day at school after a week of snowy days, and I'm called into the principal's office," said Ivy's mom, after a long period of silence. "What is going on with you, Ivy? You never used to do these things." Ivy didn't respond. She just stared out the window at the huge piles of snow on either side of the road. Her mom heaved a sigh. "You want to tell me what happened?" "This kid at my lunch table keeps calling me Ginger Girl and Carrot Top and Freckle Face, and he gets all the other boys to laugh at me. I was just sick of it, so I dumped a carton of milk on his head." She paused. "He deserved it." Ivy glanced at her mom in time to see her stifle a small smile. "And you think that was an appropriate response?" Ivy shrugged. "It was all I could think of at the time. Honestly, Mom, you have no idea how mean and stupid those kids are." "Oh, I probably do. I was your age once, too. You know, there's nothing wrong whatsoever with having red hair. Some bullies like to tease, that's all. You shouldn't pay any attention to them." "Everyone always says that, but it's just hard." "I know, but this is not like you. You never used to do things like this." That was true. Ivy didn't even know why she had reacted the way she did. She liked her red hair. It was different. It made her stand out. Yet when those kids made fun of her, it just seemed so mean and rotten. She'd lashed out in anger. Ivy looked out the window. The sky was gray and lifeless. Everything was frozen and still. Her phone beeped. She took it out and saw a text from Brianna. "I looked for you at lunch. They said you got sent home. What happened?" She deleted the text without answering. What she did was probably all over the school by now. She wished she didn't have to go back over it again. "Mrs. Loomis said she would deal with the kid in question, and she wants you to tell her if the teasing continues," said Ivy's mom. "But if there's another milk carton incident, you'll be back in her office. I need you to promise me that you will not do that again, no matter what anyone says to you." "I promise," said Ivy, choking back tears. She hated to cry, especially in front of people. It frustrated her that in a horror toss she could be a fearless warrior, but in this world she was such a useless, ugly mess. When they got home, Ivy helped her mom put away the groceries. Then she went up to her room and pulled a guitar out from under her bed. She'd gotten the guitar for Christmas the year before and had started taking lessons. She loved to sing and play, especially when she was upset. Halfway through her song, her phone started to ring. She stopped playing, annoyed. It was probably Brianna again, bugging her to find out what happened. She pulled out her phone to decline the call, but then she saw the large image of the crest floating on the screen. She had never been so happy to see that crest.